the parallel between the sexual predator and sex education, which is breaking down a child's modesty. Children have a natural aversion to hearing anything sexual.
Hi everyone, it's Annalisa with The New American. Today we are going to be talking about a critical topic and one that's quite uncomfortable. So if you have any feelings about children and sexuality, you absolutely need to listen to this interview. We are talking about quote unquote comprehensive sex education in the public schools. And what our children are being taught in the public schools is frankly demonic, it's deranged, and we don't know a lot about it. But we have someone here today who's going to talk to us about sex education, what it is, what the intent is behind the curriculum. Her name is Audrey Werner. Audrey, welcome to The New American.
Thank you, Annalisa. It's an honor to be on your show.
So, Audrey, you are, among many things, a former public school nurse who also taught sex education in the schools. And since then, you have gone on to found an organization called Matthew 18. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that and tell us, how you became, first of all, knowledgeable about sex education, and why are you speaking out about it now?
I like to say God set me up when you look at my background, because as a school nurse, yes, I taught sex education for 5 years. And then my husband and I were blessed with our first child. And I wanted to still work for the health department as a public health nurse, but I wanted to work part-time, and the only part-time job available was working in the STD HIV clinic. And unfortunately, during that amount of time, I was there for 8 years, I saw things getting progressively worse. Now, in my training for sex education, to be a sex educator, I had to go through the standardized training everyone else has to go through. We were told if we went in and talked to kids about sex, we would decrease the pregnancy and the STD rate. So I was trained up. I was modest, so I was never encouraged to teach abstinence. I was told children are sexual from birth. And we needed to go in there and make sure that we were not uncomfortable when we were talking about the topic. We needed to make sure that children were not uncomfortable saying the words for the genitals out loud, knowing what sexual intercourse entailed, because this is all part of biology. So I did that, but then working in the STD HIV clinic, I saw things getting progressively worse. So that started my journey of researching who developed sex education. When did it really begin? Has it always been in America? Who started it and what was the intent behind it? And that began my journey of basically opening Pandora's box. And that was 30 years ago, 35 years ago. And I've been doing research ever since. And as you said, before, it was just exposing children to naked pictures of adults, some mostly in cartoon character. But now it's full-blown hardcore pornography in the literature for the students, as well as teaching them it's normal for adults to have sex with a child, and so much more.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much of the details of a new film that is coming out or has actually already come out, and you are a cast member of it. I encourage all our viewers to go to this film, but it's called The Mind Polluters, and it's a new film by Mark and Amber Archer, and they have really done an excellent job at exposing the curriculum that Audrey is basically describing here in a very tame way. They give you all of the details, and every parent needs to see this film, needs to understand what their child is being exposed to, because they won't send their child back if they know what is being taught. For example, they are teaching children that any child can have sex with another child as long as there are two conditions, basically. One, that there is protection, so there's a condom involved, or any other kind of contraceptive, and that could include abortion, right? Because abortion is being used as a contraception these days, and parents don't have to know. The other thing that needs to be in place for these children to be having sex is consent. So kids need to be consensual with one another and say, yes, we want to do this. How does a child process this kind of information? That is one question I have for you, Audrey, and also for parents who are listening, who are thinking about their children maybe not being taught this information. They don't know what's being taught. Get involved, because this is so important that you understand what is happening in the classroom. So back to this question of what a child processes when they hear something like, you're going to learn about genitals today and how you need to have, say, you can practice safe sex, and you're a fifth grader, and actually this stuff is being taught to kids much younger than fifth grade. I in the film they say 4-year-olds are being exposed to this kind of information. So Audrey, how does a child manage this kind of information? What kind of research is available on that, or
yes,
do you know?
And I can speak from experience, because as a child, I was a young child in the late 60s, early 70s, when sex education officially began in 1964. So it was coming into the schools at that time. And I think any adult that's listening to this, how did you feel as a child when you got that information? And it's traumatizing. I was given a book, and I noticed you said public schools, but I will tell you, I have researched the Christian sex education programs, and they have the very same root. So, and they do the same techniques. And basically what our film shows, Craig Sawyer, who is a former SEAL team member, who now has a rescue for children out of child sex trafficking, talked about the parallel between the sexual predator and sex education, which is breaking down a child's modesty. Children have a natural aversion to hearing anything sexual. I will tell you firsthand, going into a classroom to talk about this, children are trying to giggle. They're not giving you eye contact. They're looking away. And so we were told to be very firm and be very serious about this with them, and make sure that they were very attentive to what we were doing. But in essence, what a sex educator does, whether they know it or not, is breaking down that child's modesty. And that's exactly what a sexual predator does. So just to wrap your head around the fact that sex education, and I looked at the origins of who developed and what was the intent. And the intent was, it came out of the sexual revolution, and we needed to raise up children to believe they're sexual from birth. And so sex education was born to do that. And the intent, I even have a book that was written in the late 1960s that said that they predicted that by the year 2000, there'd be no more organized religion, and fathers would no longer have a place in the home. So if we can get a child sexual from birth, if we can sexualize them early on, we know that they will walk away from Christ if they've been raised in a Christian home. And we know that the likelihood of them having a successful heterosexual married life is it goes down dramatically. And that's exactly what we see in statistics. As soon as sex ed went in the schools in 1964, officially, we see a dramatic rise in teen pregnancy and STDs, and a dramatic drop in traditional families. Single parent homes start to explode right after we start to put sex ed in the schools. So it's accomplished exactly what it is meant to do, which is to destroy the foundations of America, which is the church and the traditional family.
Yeah. Even though it was, under the guise of informing a child so that they make better decisions, right? That if they have this information, they're going to make different choices. They're not going to be promiscuous. They're not going to engage in sex. But as you said, the exact opposite happened and is still happening. And now today it's celebrated, this perverseness. I mean, It's like Sodom and Gomorrah in real time. It's an actual celebration of the perverse and the debauchery that is happening in our society. It seems to be beginning to be introduced in the schools. And thank you for correcting me. It is not just the public schools, it is Christian schools, it is churches. And I want to talk a little bit about your passion for really what everything you've just said sends the message that you're trying to awaken people to what is happening, and also awaken Christians who may believe that it's not going to impact them, right? It's not going to impact our family because maybe we're not sending our child to the public school. But do we know what they're being taught in the Christian schools? What are we being taught? What are the children being taught at home versus what are they being taught in schools? And is the best answer homeschool? That's something that I would really encourage parents to consider, is homeschooling their children. And in fact, I'm emphatically saying get your children out of the public schools or any school really and teach them at home. But
and going back to the movie is really three parts. It talks about the origin, the disturbing science, fraudulent criminal science that's behind sex education. It gets into the social emotional learning, which is a hot topic right now, as well as critical race theory. And basically our schools, our government has figured out how to rewire children's brains so that they hate God, hate America, and embrace this sexual perversion. And they're doing a very good job. And what's so disturbing is in the film is we're actually showing you actual curricula that is in the schools. We are showing you actual books that are in the children's libraries. So this has been the wake-up call for Americans. And I will say that parents are responding, patriot groups are responding, churches not so much. A few of them are starting to wake up a little bit. Like you said, we think we don't have to worry about that because we're in our own little bubble. But unfortunately, if the culture around you is changed so dramatically, your bubble's not going to be so safe much longer.
Yeah. So if this has been happening since, let's say, the 40s, 30s and 40s, I read that Alfred Kinsey was writing books about human sexuality as early as the 40s and 50s. And if his ideas were somehow taken and used as gospel for certain institutions like higher education, and I've heard you mention that it's not just in education, it's in our legal systems, it's in our banking systems, it's really infiltrated every major institution in America. If these ideas have somehow stuck, which it seems like they have, yes, how do we kill them? You know, what is the anecdote? I love how you have talked about, you know, the anecdote is returning to biblical principles. Easier said than done when, you know, we still have people sending their kids to schools. We have Christians still sending their children to schools. And can we drain the schools can we defund the schools? What is your solution to, you know, just killing these ideas, or really having people say, this is child abuse. This is not what I want my child to learn. And it's detrimental. And I mean, frankly, I personally could not get through Mind Polluters watching the film because the material was so graphic, and it was quite, you know, so stunning to me that I honestly could not finish it. But I got the gist, you know, I understand. And but maybe people need to see that kind of graphic content to understand it clearly. But what do you think? You wrote a book, in fact, called 10 Tips on How Not to Talk to Your Kids About Sex. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, you've obviously thought about it, solutions for how to teach children about sex.
Yes. Yeah. And I didn't intend to write a book, but when I looked at all the Christian materials, I would say 90% of them go back to this horrible science of Alfred Kinsey. So I wrote a book called 10 Tips on How Not to Talk to Your Kids About Sex. The first half of it is on the history over the last 100 years on the moral decline of America. So it gives you all the information. That science infiltrated every institution in America. So I don't care if you're in medicine, if you are in education, if you are in the law, if you are in the military or you're in the ministry, you have been profoundly affected by Kinsey science and the sexual revolution. We have completely shifted as a nation because of this fraudulent science. And I will tell you that one of the experts who had met with Justice Scalia way back and showed him this information, he said, if we're throwing out Bible-based laws based on this fraudulent, awful science, and we find out this science is a fraud and it's criminal, then shouldn't we, instead of coming up with new laws to protect what we're losing, shouldn't we go back to the old laws and make them honorable again? And that is, again, as a Christian, this is a God thing. We are up against David and Goliath, but I have changed my prayer to, because it's hard. It's hard to wake up Christians because we were born in the middle of the sexual revolution. And if we haven't repented, and we've been lied to and deceived, first off, and if we have not repented, then we're not going to want to hear this stuff. And so that makes that difficult. And you have this fine balance. We do have a bleep version, by the way, too, Annalisa. So that might have been a little easier to watch, was the bleep version of the film. But we go back to the fact of this is a global attack on children. This isn't just happening in America, it's happening all over the world. And I changed my prayer to, Lord, just get me to the remnant. I'm getting too beat up in the churches trying to bring this information. And I ended up going and speaking before our Texas legislators, which I'm like, really? That's where the remnant is? But believe it or not, there is a remnant in the government. There are still good people that God has placed there. The second place was going to Uganda, where I actually got to speak before Uganda Parliament. Had no intention of, I mean, I was just going there for a friend to go speak in his village. And I ended up before Parliament at the moment in history when they were about to put sex ed in their schools. And so I shared this information with them. And I like to say, a mama with the help of Almighty God went up against the UN, Planned Parenthood International, and halted sex ed from going in the schools. So if one mama can do that with Uganda, what can 10 parents in America do? And I am watching parents rise up all over the place. And we are showing this film, despite the fact that it is banned on Amazon, it is banned through Vimeo. But we are showing the film. Individuals are going out and showing the film to other people. And we are waking people up. And in Texas, because of showing this film, 4 out of the 8 legislative priorities this next legislative session are to protect children, stop sexualizing children, and to protect parental rights, because that's what we're losing right now. That's the biggest attack in America right now. So it's time to wake up and get in the game and trust God. We just have to take that step of faith. He does the rest.
Amazing. Amazing that the film is still getting a positive response, and from lawmakers, we couldn't ask for anything better than that. So you're right, the film has been banned on Vimeo. I did find the trailer on YouTube, and we are going to post that so everybody can have a look at this new film.
Sexual predators and comprehensive sex education both break down inhibitions. That's what they start with. They also gain trust with the child and then slowly start to get them towards sexual activity.
Anything goes. You are teaching children adult child sex, you're teaching transgender issues, and you know, children are moldable and influenced by that.
They said, okay, now we need you and your team to be able to explain what homosexuality is to a 4-year-old student.
To introduce this kind of material at that age, frankly, it's child abuse.
You're going to teach our children that it's okay for any 2 children of any age, of any sex, to have sexual intercourse with each other as long as 2 components are present. One's using a condom and they both give consent. Did I hear that correctly?
It's not a neutral venue. There's no such thing. Okay, the schools are doing your job. They are discipling your children, but they're not discipling them in the faith of Jesus Christ.
It's only the exceptional child that even survives that system. Most do not survive, most have not survived.
They believe that children are sexual from birth and that they deserve and have the right to be sexually active and to seek sexual pleasure. And if anyone is stopping them from that, then you are judging and oppressing them.
Even kindergarten now, they're wanting to teach them more and more perverse information and acts and put that into the children's minds. And once that poison is in a child's mind, it doesn't leave. They'll always remember what they learned. And it's by design, it's orchestrated.
In my humble opinion, it will be worse before it gets better.
It's important to remind the audience that yes, you absolutely had a hand in halting sex education from entering the schools in Uganda. That is incredible. I could spend an hour.
You can go to my website and you can put that on the link to my website. But if you go to my website and go to presentations, you can see the actual presentation to Uganda Parliament.
So did your ministry, was that a outreach of this trip or this mission to help in Uganda?
Yeah, my ministry is Matthew. It's based on Matthew 18:15-17, because when I looked at 90% of the sex education and marital intimacy resources that are available to Christians in Christian bookstores, it goes back to the horrible science of Alfred Kinsey, who Kinsey used the Nazis who did experiments on children. He used that data as well as worshiped the Satanist Aleister Crowley. So this is a very demonic root, and Christians are using this not knowing where it came from. So this is a time for a huge wake-up call in America. There's many things going on. God is revealing a lot. And I'm standing, I get a front row seat to this. So it's amazing what God is doing. But we've got to trust him, and we've got to take that step of faith. We've got a prayer. My good friend, Colonel Ron Ray, used to say prayer and action. Before the Israelites went into the promised land, they prayed first, fasted and prayed, and then they stepped in the river and took that step of faith. And that's what we've got to do in America.
Yeah. And then they grumbled when they didn't have everything they had before, right? In Egypt.
Right.
But you're right. Well, thank you so much for leading this charge. And we will absolutely direct people to your website. Can you tell us what that is? And also the name of the website for your ministry?
Yes, it is Matthew18.org, 18, or you can do the Roman numeral 18. So I have both domains.
Well, we will be looking for more from you, Audrey, and I hope to interview you again. There's so much to talk about on this topic, but everyone, please remember to go to themindpolluters.com and check out this new documentary that exposes sex education in the schools. It is absolutely essential for parents, pastors, educators, anyone who cares about the next generation and where we're headed as a society. Well, thank you so much, Audrey, and have a blessed day.